With the signing of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law by President Biden, Reclamation takes on new opportunities to invest in our infrastructure and benefit the American public for the next generation. A great deal of activity is well underway across Reclamation as we prepare to implement the law. We're establishing a team to lead implementation and develop a plan that outlines how Reclamation will implement the law. And we will provide information to tribal and non-federal partners throughout this process. These information sessions are designed to inform you and address your questions. And we will have updates today that address our mission areas. The topics will include dam safety, WaterSMART grants, water recycling, multi-benefit projects to improve watershed health, desalination, and drought contingency plans. Updated information about Reclamation's implementation of the law is always available at usbr.gov/bill. And questions and comments can be submitted to usbr.bill@usbr.gov. Again, we're committed to transparency throughout this process, and we appreciate your support of this historic opportunity to improve our nation's water infrastructure. At this time, I am honored to welcome Deputy Commissioner Camille Kalimlim-Tootin for opening remarks.
Good morning, Rob, and good morning to everyone. My name is Camille Kalimlim-Tootin, and I'm a Deputy Commissioner. It's a privilege to be joining you today alongside my colleagues who make up the team that will be implementing the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, or actually the law. I would first like to introduce Matt Mossieri on our team, as well as Beth Hughes-Brown, who are our co-leads in implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law. This law represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make progress across Reclamation's mission area and advance drought resiliency through investing heavily in infrastructure modernization, conservation, ecosystem recovery, natural resources monitoring, dam safety, rural water, and tribal water rights settlements. The law authorizes resources to mitigate impacts of drought through investment in water storage and water recycling, and reuse WaterSMART and drought contingency plans. And it's not just the drought for next year, it's building resiliency for the future. The law appropriates a total of $8.3 billion to Reclamation for fiscal years 22 to 26 for Western water infrastructure. And that's Title IX of the law. And there's certainly other provisions that are Reclamation is included, but that's the one that we'll focus on the most. And so today we'd like to take the time to talk you through some of those new and existing programs, starting with this session today. So thank you again for joining us. We're very excited about this opportunity and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Tootin. We will now receive an update on the implementation plan. And at this time, I'm honored to introduce Reclamation's Chief Engineer, Dr. David Rath.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Tootin. And thanks to everybody who is here to join us today for this conversation. Good morning. As Rob indicated, I am David Rath and am honored to be Reclamation's Chief Engineer. Reclamation has the legacy of historic engineering achievements that range from the geographically small to wonders of the modern world. As the Chief Engineer, which is a position that dates back to even before the signing of the Reclamation Act in 1902, I am privileged and honored to have this opportunity to support the implementation of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. The Chief Engineer organization includes our Dam Safety and Infrastructure Directorate, the Water Resources and Planning Office, which implements many of the authorities associated with the WaterSMART umbrella, the Technical Service Center, the Research and Development Office, and the Power Resources Office. Through this Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the programs that these offices oversee, which is primarily the focus here this morning, will be focused on providing our leadership in engineering and construction, safety, operations and maintenance throughout the Western United States. We will be looking throughout these programs to utilize as many existing programmatic structures and processes with the intent of reducing unnecessary burdens and finding efficiency wherever possible. With that, I'd like to get right into the heart of this and introduce Mr. Miguel Rocha, who is currently leading our Dam Safety Office. The Dam Safety Office will obviously be overseeing our implementation of the dam safety authorities within the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and which authorizes and appropriates $500 million over the next 5 years. Miguel.
Thank you, Dave. And good morning, everyone. As Dave mentioned, my name is Miguel Rocha. I work in the Dam Safety Office responsible for project development and budget planning, currently acting as the Chief of Dam Safety. The mission of Reclamation's Dam Safety Program is to ensure that reclamation dams do not present an unreasonable risk to people, property, and the environment. We own 487 dams and dikes, of which 360 are classified as high and significant hazard potential, which means if they were to fail, they would cause life loss or significant damage. To manage these risks, we use a holistic approach to keeping our dams safe. The approach ranges from specialized training to dam tenders, to emergency action plans, to regular inspections, and to detailed risk evaluations. When the estimated risks exceed the federal guidelines for dam safety, we pursue modifications to the dam, most often structural. Continuous evaluation of risks at our dams is a cornerstone of our program. Currently, we have 12 dams where modifications are necessary. Of the 12 dams, we anticipate 9 will be under construction in the next 5 years. The infrastructure law provides $500 million over the next 5 years, which will support these critical projects, streamline construction management, maintain the operational capacity of Reclamation's dams, and most importantly, minimize the risk to the downstream public. Thank you for your time today and the opportunity to share information about the dam safety program and the infrastructure law. Dave, back to you.
Thanks, Miguel. Now I'd like to focus on a number of the activities and programs within the WaterSMART umbrella and introduce Ms. Amanda Erath and Ms. Avra Morgan, who both work in the Water Resources and Planning Office and will be helping implement the authorities associated with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law as they are represented in these WaterSMART programs. Amanda.
Thanks, Dave. I'm Amanda Erath, and I coordinate the Title 16 Water Reclamation and Reuse Program and our desalination construction project funding. I'm going to be talking today about those activities, and then I'll turn it over to Avra, who's going to talk about some of the other parts of WaterSMART. As you may have seen on that previous slide, we did receive funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law for numerous activities that are part of the WaterSMART program. The Title 16 program received $550 million over 5 years in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This program is an existing program and has been around since 1992. Through the program, Reclamation has provided grant funding to numerous water recycling and reclamation projects across the West. Eligible project types under the Title 16 program include projects that reclaim and or reuse multiple different types of wastewater, including municipal, industrial, agricultural, or projects that reclaim impaired groundwater or surface waters. Through the Title 16 program, the federal government provides up to 25% of the cost of a project, and there is a 75% minimum non-federal cost share match required. All that funding is going to be allocated, has been for years, and will be allocated under the infrastructure law through a competitive selection process. We do anticipate that we will be issuing our next funding opportunity early in calendar year 2022. Next slide, please. A new activity that is included in the infrastructure law is the large-scale water recycling funding that is made available in the law. This is a new authority for reclamation. Eligible entities include states, Indian tribes, municipalities, irrigation districts, wastewater districts, or essentially any other organizations that have water or power delivery authority. Eligible projects under this new authority include projects that have a total project cost of $500 million or more and are located in a reclamation state, 17 Western states. And then the type of project is essentially the same as Title 16 projects. So it's projects that reclaim and reuse wastewater, including municipal, industrial, domestic, or agricultural, or reclaim impaired groundwater or surface water. Again, the federal government will be providing up to a maximum of 25% of the total project cost, with 75% of the project cost being provided by the non-federal project sponsor. Since this is a new activity, we are currently working to develop guidelines and a funding allocation process, so more details to come in the future. Next slide, please. The last thing I'm going to talk about is our water desalination construction project funding. The infrastructure law includes $250 million for these projects. And I apologize, I should have mentioned for the new large-scale recycling authority, there is $450 million in the infrastructure law provided for that activity over the next 5 years. So water desalination projects, eligible project types here include ocean or brackish water desalination projects. Again, the federal government will provide up to a maximum of 25% of the total project cost, with a required 75% being provided by the non-federal project sponsor. This funding is also allocated through a competitive process similar to Title 16, and we expect to issue our next funding opportunity announcement here early in calendar year 2022. With that, I will turn it over to Avra to talk about some of the other activities that are part of WaterSMART.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm Avra Morgan, and I work on the WaterSMART programs along with Amanda Erath, and I'm going to talk to you today about first a couple of our existing programs and then some of the new authorities that were included in the infrastructure law. So starting first with WaterSMART grants, this is an existing program and it includes a set of different activities within that one title, WaterSMART grants. It includes some of our better known programs which provide funding for water conservation and efficiency projects, including the water and energy efficiency grants and also the small scale water efficiency grants. Reclamation received $400 million under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law for WaterSMART grants, and this will be allocated over the set of activities within that umbrella. So in general, the eligible applicants are the same across these different types of activities, including states, tribes, districts, local governments, nonprofits, which could include environmental nonprofit groups or watershed groups in some cases, and regional authorities, all located in the 17 Western states, the territories, Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. There are some variations in the eligible entities for each of these project types, but it's generally those eligible applicants that we just listed there. So within the water and energy efficiency, oh, that's okay. So next slide. I was just going to mention that WaterSMART grants, again, is an umbrella. It includes water conservation and efficiency projects, but it also includes funding for projects with ecological benefits. So we have one other program, the Cooperative Watershed Management Program, which also provides funding for projects that have ecological benefits. And both of these received additional funding under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. The Cooperative Watershed Management Program received $100 million, and the WaterSMART grants, as mentioned, received $400 million under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. We provide funding for both of these programs through one funding opportunity referred to as the Environmental Water Resources Projects Funding Opportunity. This year's funding opportunity recently closed, and we'll have another one in fiscal year 2022 for these project types. And they include water conservation projects with ecological benefits, projects to address drought conditions as they impact ecological resources, and projects to improve the condition of a natural feature and nature-based feature, as well as watershed restoration projects. So this funding opportunity pulls from both those programs, the Cooperative Watershed Management Program and WaterSMART grants. Next slide. Now I'll talk about a couple of our new authorities. The Infrastructure Act included an authority for multi-benefit projects to improve watershed health. This is a brand new authority for reclamation, and the infrastructure bill also included $100 million for these activities. The eligible project types include projects for design, implementation, and monitoring of habitat restoration projects to improve watershed health in basins impacted by a reclamation project. The federal government for these projects will cover up to 75% of the cost share, with a minimum non-federal requirement of a 50% cost share contribution. And as I mentioned, this is a new competitive program and it's currently under development. Next slide. Finally, the Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration and Protection projects are a new authority for reclamation that was authorized separately from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, but there was $250 million included for this program in the infrastructure law. The eligible project types include funding for design, study, and construction of aquatic ecosystem restoration and protection projects that will improve habitat, including restoration projects, fish passage projects, or the removal of barriers for fish passage. In this case, the federal government will cover up to 65% of the cost share, and the non-federal minimum contribution is 35%. And again, this is a new competitive program that's currently under development. And with that, I will pass it back to David Raff.
Thanks, Avra, and thanks, Amanda. I'd like to quickly turn the opportunity over to Ms. Carly Jurla, who will be working and speaking with Mr. Dave Ahrens and Mr. Daniel Picard, addressing the authorities and appropriations associated with the Colorado River Basin. Carly? Looks like Carly had a quick technical issue here. I suspect she will be right back.
Dave, do we want to go to the next slide and then come back?
Carly's back. Give her a second.
Okay.
There she is. Carly, it's all yours if you're there. You're on mute.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Dave. My name is Carly Jurla. I'm a senior Colorado River program manager with Reclamation. We are very pleased with the funding in the infrastructure law provided for implementation of the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan, or the DCP, and related agreements. The law specifies $300 million with $50 million going towards the Upper Basin Drought Contingency Plan. This funding is critically important as the basin is in the 22nd year of drought and experiencing record low reservoir levels. The system's two major reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Combined, Lake Powell and Lake Mead store about 85% of the system's 60 million acre foot storage capacity. The DCP was adopted in May of 2019 in response to ongoing drought and low runoff conditions that had significantly increased the risk of reaching critically low elevations in Lakes Powell and Lake Mead. The DCP was adopted after nearly 6 years of negotiations among the 7 Colorado River Basin states, municipal and irrigation districts, and essential engagement by tribes, particularly in Arizona. The key elements in the lower basin, the states of Arizona, California, and Nevada, are required water saving contributions in Lake Mead, additional water storage and recovery flexibility to incentivize even more additional conservation, and a requirement for reclamation to seek programs and activities to create and conserve additional water to increase Lake Mead elevations. Key elements in the Upper Basin DCP, which would be in the states of Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, are drought response operations. These are additional releases from the reservoirs above Lake Powell with the goal of protecting Lake Powell elevations, and demand management. Lastly, to put this funding in perspective, over the 5-year period between 2015 and 2019, almost $30 million was spent in the Lower Basin through the Pilot System Conservation Program, which was another important drought response activity that had the same goal of the DCP to protect critical elevations and increase storage in Lake Powell and Lake Mead, and about $8.5 million in the Upper Basin. So this $300 million provided by the infrastructure law is almost 8 times that amount and is an important and significant investment towards the sustainability of the Colorado River Basin. Next slide, please. Another piece of funding the law directed to the Colorado River Basin is to the basin's endangered species recovery programs. The law specifies $50 million for these programs, and in the Upper Basin, the programs are the Upper Colorado River Endangered Fish and San Juan River Basin Recovery Implementation Programs, and these provide ESA compliance for water projects throughout the Upper Basin. And then also through the Adaptive Management Program, which is an outcome of the Grand Canyon Protection Act. And this provides organization and a process to ensure the use of scientific information for decision-making regarding Glen Canyon Dam operations and protection of downstream environmental resources consistent with the Act. And in the Lower Basin, the key program here is the Lower Colorado River Multi-Species Conservation Program, or the MSCP. And this ensures ESA compliance for all water operations and maintenance activities along the Lower Colorado River. All of these programs have broad partner and stakeholder involvement. The MSCP includes a 50-50 cost share for federal and non-federal for activities to ensure ESA compliance. And the additional funding provided by the law, the $50 million towards these programs, will be a significant investment. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Daniel Picard, who is the Deputy Regional Director in the Upper Colorado Basin region, to provide a regional perspective on this funding.
Thank you, Carly. And as Carly indicated, my name is Daniel Picard. I work with the Upper Colorado Basin region as an Assistant Regional Director. I wanted to just quickly to introduce myself, indicate to you that I have been assigned as the Upper Colorado region's representative to the Bureau's team with regard to the BIL legislation. Indicate to you further that we have long-standing programs within the region, UCROP, as Carly mentioned, UCROP, the Adaptive Management Program, and the RIP programs, where we have been able to work with you, tribes and states and stakeholders, in terms of spending money on similar programs in the past. We will continue to use those programs with respect to our implementation, again, with you with regard to the BIL funding and this particular legislation. So we look forward to that. We look forward to working within the Reclamation team to implement this new legislation and implement this new funding program. So again, thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself and to indicate to you how the Upper Basin will be approaching this. And I will turn time over to Dave Arend with the Lower Basin.
Morning, everyone. I'm David Arend. Thank you, Daniel. I am the Assistant Regional Director for the Lower Colorado Basin. For the Lower Basin, we'll be executing the funds identified for the Drought Contingency Plan through our Lower Colorado River Operations Program, exercising the Secretary of the Interior's authority as the Water Master for the Lower Colorado region. And for the Endangered Species Program, we'll be executing funds through the Multi-Species Conservation Program, which is the Lower Colorado Basin multi-partner program for meeting our Endangered Species Act requirements. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity, and I thank you, and I turn it back over to Dr. Rath.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, David, and thanks to Carly as well. I'd also like to just take a moment and re-thank everybody that has spoken here this morning. Again, we just heard from Mr. Dave Ahrens from our Lower Colorado River Basin, Mr. Daniel Picard from our Upper Colorado River Basin, Ms. Carly Jurla, who is in a new capacity within the Bureau of Reclamation, within the Chief Engineer organization, focused and showing our commitment to the long-term planning for that basin. She joined our office in June of 2021 and will be focused on developing long-term guidelines for the Colorado River, working with all of the stakeholders that are on this call, as well as many others, and our offices here internally within Reclamation. I'd also like to thank Ms. Avra Morgan and Ms. Amanda Erath from our Water Resources and Planning Office, Mr. Miguel Rocha from our Dam Safety Office. I'd like to thank Rob Manning, who is our Chief of Public Affairs, and then some, again, folks that maybe didn't get a lot of face time here today, but have been vital to this development. Mr. Peter Soweth, also from our Public Affairs Office, Mr. Matt Mossieri and Ms. Beth Hughes Brown, who are helping lead our implementation of this new law. We also are very honored to have Deputy Commissioner Tootin here today. From what we have heard this morning, just to summarize, WaterSMART, an umbrella program, provides a number of opportunities to partner with the federal government to develop new infrastructure and to improve the environment in which our infrastructure operates. We certainly look forward to working with all of you in finding opportunities to leverage these dollars and move forward in our reliable infrastructure in the West, ensuring our delivery of water and power, and doing so in an environmentally and economically sustainable manner. Also, we've heard our commitment to utilize these dollars to ensure that our dams are safe. And lastly, that we are very much looking to work between our upper and lower Colorado River basins, along with my offices, and ensuring that the legacy and partnerships within the Colorado River, particularly in this era of drought, are addressed. I'd like to thank you all, everybody here that has participated and joined us, for your interest and engagement this morning. I am privileged and honored to help lead many of these offices and programs that we've heard from this morning. And speaking on behalf of our Upper and Lower Colorado regional directors, I know they feel the same way, and that we're committed to implement this new legislation transparently and effectively. With that, I'd like to hand it back to you, Mr. Rob Manning. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Rath, and thanks to all of our presenters. At this time, we will address your questions. Again, please raise your hand using the hand icon at the top of the screen, or submit your questions by sending an email to usbr.bill@usbr.gov. That's usbr.bill@usbr.gov. Again, raise your hand with the hand icon or submit an email. And we appreciate your patience as we manage throughout this process. We're going to try to get to as many questions as possible. Peter?
Rob, I have one question via email. This is for Amanda and Avra. What types of projects are prioritized for approval for WaterSMART grants?
Thank you, Peter. I can respond to that. This is Avra Morgan. So for WaterSMART grants, there are a couple of different types of projects that are prioritized depending on the funding opportunity. For the water and energy efficiency grants, the priority there is water conservation. Can you support your water savings accomplished through the specific project? And again, these are projects to line canals or improve efficiencies in water delivery through water measurement, automation, and other kinds of improvements. In addition, if we're looking at the environmental water resources projects, which are also a part of WaterSMART grants, for those projects, we would look at benefits to ecological resources. So does the project provide restoration benefits to a river or stream? Does it help support habitat for endangered fish or other wildlife? And does it help address impacts during times of drought on those types of ecological values? And finally, for the small scale water resources projects, they're similar to the water and energy efficiency grants in that we want to see improvements in conservation and efficiency, but because they're smaller dollar projects, we're not so focused on how much water you're saving, rather looking at a qualitative description of improvements to water management.
Thank you, Avra. Okay, any more questions? We don't see any hands raised. Feel free to raise your hand or send an email to usbr.bil@usbr.gov. Again, this is your time to ask questions, and we are committed to being as transparent as we can throughout this process.
Rob, we have one question from Devin Reinerson. Devin, if you could unmute and let us know your affiliation. Devin, are you able to unmute?
Peter, he just chatted that he said he couldn't unmute.
Okay, let's go ahead and there we go. Devin, you can try to unmute now.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can, loud and clear. Thank you so much, Devin.
Great. Thank you for your patience. Wondering about the multi-benefit project and what sort of projects you're looking for. Would habitat restoration and recovery for on-river tribal land be a project that would be interested, that might score well in a competitive circumstance there?
Yeah, so the multi-benefit projects, again, that's our brand new authority passed in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the program itself is still under development, but it is focused on restoration projects, and so long as there's a nexus to water management in some way, I think that the project that you described would fit.
This would be something in the MSCP benefits. Would be good. All right, great.
Yeah, so long as there's benefits to, the environment, fish habitat, ESA listed species always is something that we're looking for benefits for. I believe that the project that you described sounds like it fits well with the law.
Great. And what do you expect for timing for funding along those lines?
We are currently working on developing a funding opportunity, and in our processes we like to put our criteria out for comment, so it's going to take us a little bit of time, but in FY22, fiscal year 22, we hope to have a funding opportunity available for those projects, probably looking at midway through to later half of the year.
Sure. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Rob, we've had a couple of people ask when the slides will be available on the chat.
Okay. And so the video of this presentation and slides will be available at the website www.usbr.gov/bill, B-I-L. And you'll be able to view this presentation. Peter?
Rob, we have a question in the chat. This is for Carly, Dave, and Dan. For the $50 million to the Colorado River Basin Endangered Species Recovery Program, how will the funding be split up between the respective groups? And what will be the fraction or funding for each program, or is it a competitive grant?
Thanks, Peter. I can start with that one and then maybe hand it over to Daniel for additional comments. It's a really good question. It's undetermined at this point. There will be discussions amongst the programs that do have a very broad stakeholder component to them to think about the types of projects those programs have been looking towards and what makes sense in terms of divvying up that funding. So much more conversations to be had, and it will be a broad and inclusive process. And Daniel, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add.
I don't have anything additional. I would just agree with what Carly has indicated, that there's still early on, still a good discussion that will have to be had between the regions, but also within Reclamation in general with regard to the funding once it is made available.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Robin, interpreter. Robin, if you could unmute and let us know your affiliation.
Hi there. This is Robin, interpreter. I'm an attorney for the Yavapai Apache Nation, Pascua Yaqui tribe, and San Juan Southern Paiute tribe in Arizona for water rights and water resources. My question was with regard to the infrastructure bill, are there any unique differences between, the funding allocations that might go to tribes or versus to other municipalities? In other words, is there a difference in cost share maybe, or is there the ability for the tribes to use other federal funding sources as a cost share? Or any other unique things in the bill that would apply to tribes differently?
Dave, do you want to take that?
I can take that if that
great.
works for everyone. Good morning, Camille Klimlem-Tooten. Thank you for that question. What we're talking about specifically today, most of it is within our existing programs and authorities, and there will be other stakeholder sessions, as you know, that will discuss our new authorities. So to the extent that we have those programs in place, we will follow the cost shares associated with those. But again, there's new authorities that we have that we're getting feedback, hoping to engage in dialogues with all of you as we develop the guidelines for those specific programs. And we're happy to follow up, Robin, if you had specific programs in question as well.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Given the serious nature of the lack of infrastructure for the tribes, I really think that some good consideration should be given to the tribes, needs and opportunities that they could take advantage of, given that they are a lot of times in a disadvantaged position financially. So I'm hoping that there would be some consideration for that.
Thank you.
Next question would be Leslie James. Leslie, if you could unmute and let us know your affiliation.
On the slide, I believe it's a WaterSMART slide that has a couple of bullets for renewable energy, hydropower, wind and solar. Do you guys have any guidance or on what you're thinking under that WaterSMART category? First part. Second part, is there any nexus between particularly the hydropower piece and the areas that are targeting multiple benefit or multiple purpose projects?
Hi, yes, thanks for that question. I can speak to the WaterSMART water and energy efficiency grants that have as an eligible project type projects that include generation of hydropower and also that optimize use of solar or other alternative energy. We've had these grants available for a few years now, going back quite a ways. And so there are examples on our website of projects that have been selected under our programs that you can see, and I'm happy to lead you to that. But typically with the water and energy efficiency grants, it's small scale hydropower projects installed on water delivery facilities, perhaps the use of solar energy to run kind of water measurement and water control devices in the field, and things like that. Did I answer your whole question? Oh, you asked about multi-benefit. You asked about whether.
Yeah, for the first part you did. That was very helpful. So I'll find those examples. I wasn't aware of that. So.
Yeah, and for the multi-benefit projects, you know, as I mentioned, that program is brand new to us and it's under development. The authority itself doesn't speak to alternative energy uses. It talks about ecosystem benefits, restoring native species, mitigation against the impacts of climate change, which could, you know, you would think adding alternative energy sources would help in that component. So you'll have to look to see how we frame our funding opportunity for those grants. But I would say that we're always, in all of our WaterSMART funding opportunities, we have a criterion that is focused on, will the project help adaptation to climate change? So there's always an opportunity there, so long as the project fits the scope of the funding opportunity, to make your case that using an alternative energy source would help climate change adaptation, in addition to the other benefits of your project.
Thank you. That's helpful, because I certainly see a niche for reclamation hydropower as filling some of those, checking some of those boxes for climate and resiliency. So thank you for that.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
We have another question from Thomas P. Schlosser. Thomas, if you could unmute and let us know your affiliation.
Good morning. Thanks for putting this on. Can you hear me all right?
Yes,
we can. Loud and clear.
I'm an attorney for the Hoopa Valley Indian Tribe in California, and Hoopa and other stakeholders in the Trinity River Basin have been urging some infrastructure improvements in the area between the Trinity Dam and Lewiston Dam to improve water temperature of water released to the Trinity River. The temperature problem is getting much worse because of climate change, but it's already very serious. And the project isn't, I don't know whether technically it's at the feasibility stage or whether it's beyond that. It's been scoped out quite a bit already. Is this the kind of project which would be funded as a WaterSMART project, or should the tribe be looking at some other funding source?
I can speak to that, and maybe others want to chime in. Certainly projects to address water temperature would fit in some of our WaterSMART funding opportunities, including that environmental water resources projects. We definitely have carved out as an eligible project those projects that would help support water quality and water temperature with ecological benefits. You know, one thing to look at may be the maximum funding amount available. And again, some of these programs are still under development, but depending on whether your project would fit within the funding limitations of a particular funding opportunity might be one way to look at whether it is a good fit for WaterSMART.
Tom, it's Camille. I guess the short answer is, you know, WaterSMART, there's other programs like Aquatic Ecosystem that we discussed today that we're currently developing, but I think, you know, I'm familiar with that project, and perhaps we can just follow up and see where it would best fit.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
We have a dam safety question here. For dam safety program, is there funding available for additional projects? And if so, will there be a competitive grant program?
Peter, I guess to answer that one, the funding that we discussed today, the $500 million, is for dam safety modifications to reduce the risk. So it's not available for additional projects. We do have the authority to look at additional benefits and integrating those into dam safety, but the funding typically has to come from some other source for that. And I guess I'll just clarify, and the part I'm speaking to is the funding I talked about today. There are other funding sources within the infrastructure law that may be able to provide funding for that, but I'm not able to speak to that. I don't know if someone else is today.
Miguel, that's a great point. Again, the dam safety program, as it's outlined in the law, is within our existing program. So we have the process in place for those projects, as Miguel presented earlier today.
Thank you. This is for another question about WaterSMART. In regards to the competitive grant process, does Reclamation anticipate an influx of more proposals and possible delay associated with review? Is there going to be increased capacity within Reclamation to help with grants management?
Yeah, this is Beth Hughes Brown. I can take that one. We are looking at all of that. We have to get an infrastructure, a human infrastructure in place, the human capacity to do what we need to do for evaluating and effecting grants as well as hiring. So we're looking at those things immediately and getting them in place. We started working on this act of Congress before Congress worked on this act of Congress. So we've been planning this for a while. Thank you.
And let me add, this is Greg Payne. We're working with the Department of Interior's Human Capital Office and as well as Office of Personnel Management to obtain special hiring authorities for positions directly tied to the infrastructure execution, as well as utilizing outside resources to supplement our hiring capabilities, to include interagency agreements with OPM and other bureaus and shared job announcements. So yeah, we have been already looking to do that surge. Thank you.
Miguel has a quick question on dam safety. Does the dam safety funds, I think we've kind of answered this, does it cover privately owned dams or the ones already identified for reclamation facilities?
Reclamation facilities. And I saw there was a question about Corps of Engineers dams as well. The funds that we've discussed today are for reclamation facilities.
Thank you. We have a question about cost share limitation for tribes. Is there any consideration to limit this burden? For example, FEMA provides an option for economically disadvantaged tribes to apply and qualify for a 10% economic hardship cost.
We can follow up on which specific programs are that they're specifically asking about. Peter, if you can just follow up on.
That sounds good. If you could, Garrett Altman, if you could send an email to usbr.bill@usbr.gov, we can follow up with you offline regarding that.
Hey, Peter, this is David. Yeah, there are some authorities in some of the programs that are under WaterSMART that there are opportunities to seek waivers of certain types of cost share. And there are also other programs where different types of colors of money can be used as cost share. So it really gets very specific very quickly. So if you can provide that email with as many specifics as possible, we will get back and address it as best as we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Do you anticipate any tribal set-asides for any of the programs?
We've done an analysis of almost all. This is Beth Hughes Brown again. We've done an analysis of all these programs. A great number of them, tribes are among the folks who can apply for them. but let me point out two set-asides for you. Section 70101 of the Infrastructure Act includes 2.5 billion to be shared by BIA and Reclamation. Please pay attention to that if you haven't already investigated it. And also in the Build Back Better Act, which is still under consideration, of course, there's additional funding for drought for tribes. And so, yes, there are set-asides, one pending, hopeful, and the other one already in effect.
Thank you, Beth. Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for one more question.
Rob, I have one more question here. For the guidelines that are still being developed, what is the time frame in completing the guidelines?
So for those, it varies. Frankly, there are some that we are in the process and can implement really later, midway through next year. There are others that will take a little bit more time. And so as we continue with those guidelines, we'll just be in constant communication with all of you about where those are at their points in its development.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Tootin. And thanks to you for your questions, and many thanks to all of our subject matter experts as well. Again, on behalf of the Bureau of Reclamation, thank you for attending today's information session. We're dedicated to transparency throughout the implementation of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And again, we have a series of scheduled information briefs ahead. Our next brief that is tailored to address tribal interest is scheduled for Friday, December 17th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Please go to usbr.gov/BIL for the list of all scheduled sessions and updated information. And again, this is a Microsoft Teams live event, and it will be available for viewing after this session at usbr.gov/BIL. And again, you may also send your questions to usbr.bil@usbr.gov. Thank you so much for attending today's session, and happy holidays.